What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I'll be setting up my fantasy cruncher for the Saturday night football game between the Chargers and the Jaguars. I'll be setting up here for the largest field GPP on DraftKings. First thing I'm going to do, as usual, is I'm going to rearrange my columns. I have a quick view saved where I can see everything I want to see in the middle of my screen, that being ownership projections, my projection, exposure caps, etc. Let me make sure I'm on the right game here. Yep. Okay. We don't have ownership projections in there yet. We'll have that by tomorrow. All right. Next, I'm going to remove every player with a projection of 0. The reason I'm doing this is to make it go quicker when I'm making groups later. If you remove a player here, they won't show up as you're trying to make groups. So you can save yourself some time not having to wade through all these players multiple times. Just get rid of them once. All right, I have removed every player with a projection of 0. Next, I'm going to go to the captain tab here. And this for a 150 set of lineups. I generally start with an exposure cap on all players of 20%. There's nothing magical about this number. You can go 100% on some players if you want to. 20% usually just a starting place for me, a good way to diversify my lineups. I think I'm going to use 20% for this slate, so I'll keep that there. And then I'm going to go into advanced options. Most of my work here is going to be done in the general tab and the groups tab. Actually, all of my work here is going to be done in those two tabs. Starting here in the general tab, unique players per lineup, I'm going to leave at 1 in a 150 set. If you're making 40 or fewer lineups, I would typically recommend changing this to 2 just for the sake of diversifying your lineups. Unique players per, skip this. Team salary, I'm not going to set a minimum salary. I will set a maximum salary just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. If I am lucky enough to win the contest, I want to win a lot of money. I don't want to be duplicated 1,000 times and just win, $3,000 for my efforts. On the nights that I'm lucky enough to win the contest, I want to win big money. So I'm going to leave some salary on the table to avoid those duplicated lineups. So I'm setting a salary cap of 49,000, leaving 1,000 on the table. By the way, please do hit the like button on this video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel, and of course, you can hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Offensive players versus defense, the default is set to a max of 2 players. I'm going to change that to a max of 5 players, so I could theoretically have 5 players from one team against just the defense of the opposing team. Not something that is going to win all that often, not something I'm going to have in many of my lineups, but it can win, and the field is reluctant to use that type of setting to make that kind of lineup. So I do like to allow for it in my lineup sets if it projects well enough. Exposure cap, I'm going to leave at 100%. I already changed in the captain spot to 20%. Randomness, I'm going to set to 30%. If you want more control over your lineups, either don't use randomness at all or just set a lower randomness number and you can more easily control your lineups as you're building. Minimum projection included in calculation, the default is set to 3. I'm going to leave it at 3. If there's a player who I want to have in my player pool who projects for fewer than 3 fantasy points, I will just manually boost their projection to above 3 fantasy points. And then players from each team max, I'm going to leave at 5, so I can have 5 players from one team against 1 on the opposing team. That's everything that I do here in the general tab. Next, I'm going to move to the groups tab. You know what I did immediately the first time I won 6 figures in a DFS contest? I converted my trial membership to Stokastic, awesome at the time, to a full annual subscription. That's because I knew these were the best tools in the industry. That was 2019, and they've gotten even better since then. Well, good news. You can get access to these same tools without winning 6 figures first with a great offer from BetMGM. You can get 2 months of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and bet at least $10. That's every tool on the site for every sport other than Fantasy Cruncher, a $240 value. All you need to do is click the link in the description of this video, follow the steps, and deposit $10 or more, and place a bet of $10 or more on whatever you want. And when that bet settles, MGM will hit you up with how to get your subscription to Stokastic. You don't even need to win the bet. On top of all of that, you also get bet insurance on your first bet up to $1,000. That means if you win the bet, you win the bet. You get the money. If you lose the bet, you still get your money back in site credits. It's a great deal from BetMGM and a long trial subscription to the best DFS tools out there. The legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus, and if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Reminder, make sure you use the link or use promo code Platinum Sub, or we won't be able to track you. Group, so I'm finding. And the most important groups here revolve around your quarterbacks because of the way things are scored on DraftKings, where receivers score more than the quarterback on every passing play. So I'm going to start with Justin Herbert at captain, make him my key player. All right, so we've named this one Justin Herbert captain, made Herbert at captain the key player. Now I'm going to sort by position and add all of these Chargers pass catchers to a secondary group. And I'm including the running backs here. Obviously, Austin Eckler, very involved in the passing game for the Chargers. All right. Now, Justin Herbert kind of took a step back in his running this year, especially since like week 13. He just has not been running at all. Who knows? Maybe in the playoffs he will increase his running a little bit. He ran a little bit last year. This year is down below 10 yards per game on the ground. Didn't score a single rushing touchdown, but in his first 2 seasons in the league, I believe he had 8 rushing touchdowns, and he did rush, for more than 10, I think close to 20 yards per game last year. So he has shown some rushing upside in the past, not really recently, but sometimes quarterbacks, become more likely to run in the playoffs when it matters a little bit more. If it can help the team win, they're more willing to run. So I think I'm going to assume Justin Herbert has some rushing upside here, and I'm going to only force in one of these pass catchers in lineups with Justin Herbert in the captain spot. I'm not going to require more than one, so I'm going to leave this as is. If any key player use at least one player from this group. I am, though, also going to give boost to the pass catchers because typically if I have Justin Herbert in the captain spot, I would prefer to have multiple pass catchers from the Chargers. So I'm going to give a little boost to all of these pass catchers and smaller boost to the running backs. All right, next I'm going to make a similar group for Trevor Lawrence. All right, I'm going to find Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot, make him my key player, and then again, go back to the top, add all of these Jaguars pass catchers now to the secondary group. And I'm going to include the running backs here. It's a little bit of a closer call. Travis Etienne, not really that involved in the passing game, hasn't run that many routes. Actually, I think over the past 2 weeks, JaMychal Hasty has actually run more routes than Travis Etienne has, but he has at least some pass catching upside. I think he's worth including in this group. So I'll keep him in here. And similar to Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, not like an elite rusher, but he's definitely got some rushing upside, more than Herbert. I'll say that. He, rushes a good amount and certainly can score touchdowns on the ground. So definitely has some rushing upside. I'm not going to require multiple pass catchers. I will once again just require one pass catcher from lineups that have Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot. And then once again, I'm going to give boost to the rest of these pass catchers. With the running backs, I'm almost tempted to not give them any kind of boost because there's such little correlation. I think I'll just give them the same amount because they actually project not all that great anyway, so not a huge concern, I think. So I'm just going to give them the usual running back little boost. All right, and then do the same thing now in the flex. I'm going to create a Herbert flex group. So I'm going to find Justin Herbert in the flex, make him my key player. And same thing, add all these Chargers pass catchers to a secondary group. And now because I've got Herbert in the flex, I can include the pass catchers in the captain spot. All right, looks good. And in the flex, I think I'm going to just leave it as is. I'm not giving any kind of boost or anything. If I were to do anything differently, just because these quarterbacks do have some rushing upside, I would be more inclined. If I were to do something differently, I would just click this button, only apply plus minus adjustments, and then give little boosts to these pass catchers, just little boosts, because I think you could play these quarterbacks in the flex without any pass catchers. I think it's simpler. I'm just going to, most of the time, if they're optimal, even in the flex, they're going to have at least one pass catcher with them. So I'm not going to, so I am going to require at least one pass catcher when I've got Justin Herbert in the flex. But you could consider in a 150 set, click in this box and just giving boosts to the players, to the pass catchers instead, and not requiring it. But this is what I'm going to do. Just going to leave it at Justin Herbert in the flex, require one pass catcher from the Chargers somewhere in my lineup. And then same thing with Trevor Lawrence. Going to find T-Law, make him my key player, and then add all of these Jaguars pass catchers to the secondary group, including the running backs again. Again, you could consider not including the running backs, but I'm trying to be a little bit loose with it because I don't even know if you need a pass catcher with Trevor Lawrence. So I guess it's better to be more inclusive here. All right, so I'm going to include ETN, Kirk, add all these guys at captain. All right, looks good. And again, not going to give boosts or anything, just going to leave this group exactly as is. So that's all I'm going to do in the settings for now, at least. A lot of trial and error involved in my process, but this is where I'm going to start. Now I'm going to come out here and I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups using my projections. And then take a look at the lineup. So now the rest of my process, so those are the settings that I typically set in the advanced options. And then the rest of my process, sometimes I'll go back and change those settings if I need to after looking at my lineups. But the rest of my process typically involves looking at the lineups themselves, making sure they correlate well enough, and then looking through position by position, looking at the players, making sure I'm getting to about how much I want of each player, my exposure levels for each player. Starting here, looking at the lineups. First lineup, I see Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot. We've got 3 pass catchers with him. Great correlation there. Justin Herbert with Josh Palmer. Love it. Great lineup. Looks like it correlates well. Next lineup, Justin Herbert at captain. We've got Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, Kirk and Zay Jones. Everything looks good here. I like that lineup. Now we've got Marvin Jones at captain with Trevor Lawrence. Positive correlation there. Herbert with Eckler, Allen, Carter. These are all looking good to me. So far, I think I guess we had one up here with no Trevor. Yep, this one doesn't have Trevor Lawrence. Most of these have multiple quarterbacks, but in general, these lineups are looking good to me when I've got the quarterback in the captain spot. He's paired with multiple pass catchers. When I've got the quarterback in the flex, sometimes just one pass catcher. Exactly how I would like it to be. Yeah, so far, all these looking good. So I think as far as correlations go, these lineups look like they could win. These all look like good lineups to me. Okay, here's one a little bit questionable here. So we've got Keenan Allen in the captain spot, and then we've got Josh Palmer and DeAndre Carter, along with Austin Eckler and Justin Herbert. It's a little bit thin because obviously there's negative correlation here. If Keenan Allen is scoring enough fantasy points to be optimal in the captain spot, he's probably catching a lot of balls or scoring multiple touchdowns and taking away from the opportunities of the other pass catchers on the Chargers. So it's a little bit tough to have this many other skill players from the Chargers and Eckler, Palmer, and Carter. But honestly, given the price tags with Carter at 3,000, Palmer at 60, like these guys are all like relatively cheap. They're less expensive than they probably should be. I think it's okay. It's not something that I want to see in a ton of my lineups, but I think that it's okay. I'm not going to go back and group it out or something. You could go back into your groups and set a group saying if you have a Chargers pass catcher in the captain spot, no more than one Chargers receiver or tight end elsewhere in the lineup. And it's a little bit, I'm using pass catcher differently in different places. So in this case, I'm generally referring to wide receivers and tight ends when I say pass catcher here, because Austin Eckler can obviously score points without catching the ball too. But even among skill position players, you don't want to have too many all that often when you have somebody from that team in the captain spot. But I think that this is okay. This lineup could win. Keenan Allen, 110 yards and a touchdown on, I don't know, 10 receptions for Keenan Allen. And then, these other guys can all certainly get it done. Eckler could have 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. Palmer and Carter, a short touchdown for Carter. And, there are ways, I think, for this to work out in this case. So I think I am okay with this lineup. But that one would be the thinnest that I've seen so far. You know what I did immediately the first time I won 6 figures in a DFS contest? I converted my trial membership to Stokastic, awesome at the time, to a full annual subscription. That's because I knew these were the best tools in the industry. That was 2019, and they've gotten even better since then. Well, good news. You can get access to these same tools without winning 6 figures first with a great offer from BetMGM. You can get 2 months of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and bet at least $10. That's every tool on the site for every sport other than Fantasy Cruncher, a $240 value. All you need to do is click the link in the description of this video, follow the steps, and deposit $10 or more, and place a bet of $10 or more on whatever you want. And when that bet settles, MGM will hit you up with how to get your subscription to Stokastic. You don't even need to win the bet. On top of all of that, you also get bet insurance on your first bet up to $1,000. That means if you win the bet, you win the bet. You get the money. If you lose the bet, you still get your money back in site credits. It's a great deal from BetMGM and a long trial subscription to the best DFS tools out there. The legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus, and if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Reminder, make sure you use the link or use promo code PLATINUMSUB, or we won't be able to track you. Kind of like this. So you got Justin Herbert in the captain spot against the Jaguars defense. So typically, a lot of people don't want to play a lineup like this where you've got the quarterback in the captain spot against the opposing defense, but you see it win more often than you'd expect. I kind of like those lineups sometimes with a little bit of negative correlation. So overall, I would say I'm happy with the way these lineups are looking, but I also want to make sure I'm getting to exposure levels that I like for each player. So now I'm going to go position by position, starting at quarterback, getting a good amount of both Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. No surprise there. I think I like it that way. Running backs getting a good amount of Austin Eckler, not a ton of ETN, a little bit of JaMychal Hasty, no Joshua Kelly or Larry Roundtree, Snoop Connor. How much I have interest in these guys is really going to depend on their ownership. So, Joshua Kelly, if he's at 10% owned, I'd be perfectly happy getting 0 Joshua Kelly. If he's at 1% owned, then he's going to pique my interest. So we'll have to see what the ownership looks like tomorrow. My guess is he's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10% ownership, in which case he's going to be a fine play, not a real priority for me. JaMychal Hasty, I should sort by salary here. So he's actually cheaper. JaMychal Hasty is than Joshua Kelly. And I kind of like JaMychal Hasty better anyway. So, I mean, again, depends on the ownership. JaMychal Hasty is 25% owned. No, thank you. Not going to want, I'm going to be under the field there. But if he's 5%, maybe even 10%, I'd consider playing some JaMychal Hasty. So we'll see when the ownership comes out. But just looking at the guys at the top, I think I'd be fine with 37% Eckler, 22% ETN. Might want a little bit more. So this is all I do. I come in, change the projection ever so slightly, bit by bit, until I get to exposure levels that I like. It's really more art than science for me. And then maybe JaMychal Hasty will do the same thing. And if I want, some shares of Joshua Kelly, maybe I should also give him a little boost. All right, next I'll move to wide receiver. 66% Keenan Allen. Not going to do anything to it. I said this before. Typically, my process to start doesn't involve lowering projections. I typically raise projections the first couple runs, and then if I'm still getting to a crazy amount of some player, then I'll go back and maybe lower their projection a little bit. But to start, I usually just raise projections of players that I'm not getting as much as I'd like, and don't bother lowering to start. Christian Kirk, 19%. I really like Christian Kirk. I think it's a fine spot for him. Obviously, with Mike Williams now out, a lot of these Chargers receivers getting a little bit of a boost that the Jaguars receivers are not getting. But I still do like, I'll probably want more than 19% Christian Kirk. So maybe I give him a slight boost. Probably keep Josh Palmer where he is. Zay Jones still projects very well, point per dollar. Just going to leave him where he is, see if it comes down. DeAndre Carter, same thing. Marvin Jones looks like a reasonable number. Maybe I'd give him a little bit of, depending on, again, this all is so dependent on ownership. It's really hard to make these calls, but I'm guessing that Marvin Jones is going to be relatively low owned. Jamal Agnew, not a player that a lot of people are going to play. I'd probably want more than 2.7%. We'll give him a little boost. Probably not playing Michael Bandy. Yeah, maybe. All right, so we've got Keenan, Palmer, and Carter ahead of him. The wide receiver 4. Typically, I'll have some interest in the wide receiver 4. Obviously, the projection doesn't bode well for him. Probably not expecting a lot of action for Michael Bandy, but maybe I'd consider playing a few shares of Michael Bandy. So I'll just give him a minimal projection here of 3. And then tight end, yeah, very low number for Gerald Everett. I love me some Donald Parham. So if I get 15%, I think I'm going to want to be above the. Again, it's all dependent on what the field gets to, but most likely the field's not going to play a ton of Donald Parham, and I will probably want to be above where the field gets to. I kind of like all of these tight ends to varying degrees. Maybe give Ingram a little bit of a boost. Everett as well. Bigger boost here. He's just getting 8% right now. I'm just getting 8%, I should say. And then Donald Parham, I don't know to what extent he benefits. I think he benefits somewhat from Mike Williams being out. He's just a guy who's always live to score a touchdown, have a couple big grabs. So I really do like playing him when he's relatively cheap. Probably will get some run. Maybe I'll give him a little boost. Kickers, not getting to any of Dicker the kicker. Probably want to fix that. Man, that is a low projection, like shockingly low. Don't see that very often. I'll probably want to have some Dicker the kicker in my lineups though. Patterson obviously projects better. Well, if I just project them the same, most likely I'm going to get more of Patterson than Dicker because Patterson is cheaper than Dicker. There's no correlations involved or anything. So most likely I'll get to more of Patterson. I do have obviously randomness on. There are, constraints with needing one player from each team that comes into play, but typically I'll get more of the less expensive player with the same projection. And then defenses, neither of these defenses project all that well. We'll have to see where the ownership comes in. But if it's going to be low, I'll probably take some shots. So I'm going to give a little bit of a boost to each of these defenses. And then crunch it out again. All right. And I'm not going to go through this process a million times. Sometimes I'll crunch it out 20, 30 times before I get to the lineup set that I like. I'm not going to do that here because I do it so incrementally. It takes a little while. But typically then I go back through all of these positions again, and I'll start at quarterback again. Still getting a good amount of quarterbacks. Looks good. Running backs, still not getting much. JaMychal Hasty, maybe I want a little bit more than 2%, so I'd give him a boost. Travis Etienne, maybe I give him a little bit of a boost. We also see my Austin Eckler. It's down to just 27%. I don't know. He's really expensive, so maybe I'm fine with that number. Still getting to 70%, 71% Keenan Allen plus. What do I have him? 19.3% in the captain spot. So I have Keenan Allen in a ton of lineups here. I probably would want to take that down. So I told you I typically start by giving boost to players, but since I'm not going to go through my whole process here, I'll just go right ahead and reduce Keenan a little bit here. And maybe I'll just give a little boost to Agnew, Bandy. See if my reduction on Keenan Allen gives me a little bit of increase to Christian Kirk. Who knows? There's a little bit of a gap here in salary. Might not have much effect. And then these tight ends looks better now. I like getting 17% Donald Parham, probably a player that I'm going to take a stand on if he is low owned. And then Everett Ingram look pretty good too. I might want a little bit more Everett here. Kickers, yeah, as expected, got more Patterson than Dicker. I don't know how much I'm going to want exactly, but I'll give these guys just a little bit more of a boost. And then defenses, once again, they clearly need a little bit of a bigger boost if I want to have any real number of them. Out again. And again, I'm not going to go through the whole process right now. So that's going to be my final crunch. I'm going to leave it at that. But that would be just, continue this process of looking through position by position, making sure I get to exposure levels that I like. And then, of course, before you submit, you want to check one more time to make sure the correlations all look good. And just looking at the start here, Herbert, multiple pass catchers. Lawrence with Zay looks good. Trevor, multiple pass catchers. Herbert with the under. Everything looks like it correlates well here. So looks like we are on the right track. And my process will just be continuing this until I get to the exposure levels that I like. Hopefully you can use this or a similar process to make some money tomorrow night. Good luck.